All right.
All right, Cole, what are we doing first?
Okay, so first we're gonna go over the differences. Hold on. Wait, let's start over. So today we're going to be talking about the differences between agaves and cactuses. A lot of people get those mixed up, and I think it'd be really good if we went over the differences between the two. And we're also going to go over how to plant both of them. Teach you how to plant cactuses from cuttings like this, and agaves from pups like these little guys that come off of the flower stalks and then eventually grow into something like this.
Cute!
So let's just start with some differences. What do you notice the differences are between the two of these?
Cactus have needles?
Yep.
I don't know, spines?
Yep, so these are called spines on the cactus, yeah.
Okay. Agaves, you make tequila?
They do, yeah, you do make tequila out of agaves, yeah.
Okay.
Just looking at these two things, what do you, like what stands out as these two?
There's more leaves on a agave.
Yep.
What do you call it?
Yeah, these are leaves. These are leaves.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really big one.
Mm-hmm.
What else? You got anything else?
No, that's it.
Those are some of the main differences, yeah. The leaves, what happened with cactuses is they evolved to get rid of their leaves. So the spines on cactuses are actually evolutionarily, they're leaves that have been reduced down. If you look at just a typical leaf, you know, the vein on the leaf. So think of that. Think of each of these spines as just the vein of the leaf.
Oh.
And it's got no color to it, yeah. And so instead of photosynthesizing on the leaves, they photosynthesize on the stem. And that's to save water, to protect from predation, so animals eating them. So agaves evolved around, they started evolving around the same time as cactuses into what we see them as today. They also evolved in a desert environment and not a lot of water. That's why they both have succulents, right? So like you think of succulents, you think of aloes, you think of agaves, cactuses. That doesn't mean that they're all cactuses. Doesn't mean that they're all agaves or aloes. They're all different.
Are they all succulents?
They're all succulents. So you can just like just like all people are apes, all apes aren't people, right? So they're all succulents, but they're not all cactuses.
Okay,
yeah.
That makes sense.
So yeah, with agaves, you'll have leaves like this. They come off of on a rosette. They grow out. Almost looks like a pineapple. You know, the leaves on the top of a pineapple or asparagus, or they kind of have that same sequence where they come out at an angle and they spiral. Yeah, and so they've also agaves. These aren't spines like these. So on the edge of most agaves, on the edge of the leaves, you'll have these sharp protrusions. They're not leaves. They're not vestigial leaves like on the cactuses. They're actually just for protection. And always when you're dealing with agaves, big and small, make sure you watch your eyes. I've gotten poked.
Oh, no.
Several times, and they're like some of them can be really sharp. So if you're outside working with them, I recommend you wear sunglasses. And we don't have to really worry about it today, but like when you're in the gardening, or you're picking up pots, make sure you have something protecting your eyes. Cool.
So we're gonna plant it.
Yeah. So we'll start with. What do you want to start with? Do you want to start with cactus?
Let's start with the baby one.
Okay, we'll start with the agave. Something that everybody can do here in Arizona or California, Southern California. If you guys ever see an agave blooming, if you ever seen an agave blooming in a parking lot or in someone's yard, if it's in somebody's yard, get permission first. But if it's just in a parking lot and you notice they've already bloomed and they've got these little tiny babies, that kind of look like this, they'll be real small. These I've already rooted. So they've already set roots and they're growing in here. But they almost look like they're flowers, but they're not flowers. They're little baby plantlets.
Okay.
You can pull those off and you can throw them in soil and they'll grow. This came from, they're called bulbils. This came from a bulbil off of a plant I got at a friend's house. And I put it in some soil with some root hormone and it rooted these nice beautiful roots. These guys I put in not too long ago.
Ooh.
And they've already got roots here growing.
Oh.
And these I didn't actually, I was doing a little experiment, and these I didn't use root hormone, I just threw them in to these little
Egg cartons?
They're not egg. Yeah, they're like egg cartons. They actually decompose.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I'm done, when these get a little bit bigger, I can just throw them in the ground, which is what I recommend. They're like $3 at Home Depot. So yeah, so if you ever see bulbules or you see them growing up and out, I've got agaves here that came from these. Came off of another agave as they were growing and it was bigger. So that's the other way. They'll sprout kind of next to it. And again, make sure you wear eyewear before you do that. And make sure they're a little bit bigger too. You want them kind of this size before you start pulling them out off of the babies. And they'll have like a white, fleshy, plant-like thing coming off of them. It's okay to break that. That's just the connect. It's like the umbilical cord to the mama plant. So yeah, so we'll get into planting. So just I always have these around, these black pots around, because they're really handy. When you buy plants, they always come in them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not pretty to look at, but they work pretty well.
Okay.
You can use them over and over again. And then the soil I'm using, I just use this stuff. I wish I had the space and the time to make my own soil here at home. But this palm, cactus, and citrus, but it doesn't really matter the brand. Most garden centers or nurseries will have something like this. You just want, it's basically got gravel, perlite, and a little bit of organic material in there, so the water drains really well. I've actually found that this stuff in particular sometimes retains too much water, which isn't necessarily good for a lot of these desert adapted plants. You can get rot. So sometimes even just mixing this with even more gravel is a good thing to do.
Okay.
Alright, so I like to, when I'm potting out agaves that already have the roots, I like to fill up my pot with like 3/4 of worth of soil here. Keep it real loose. You don't want it real tight at first because you want to encourage this root growth. If it's got soil on the roots already, make sure to knock the soil out, but don't be too aggressive with it because you don't want to rip the roots off. These agaves are really prolific. They'll start to produce roots no matter what you do. They're pretty forgiving plants. So you take your little pot with 3/4 full of soil. So with that long root there, you're going to want to put that in, and you're going to want to put about 2 handfuls in of soil. You're going to kind of want to hold your plant and put like 2 or 3 handfuls, depending on how big your hands are, into there. You don't want to cover, whenever you're planting anything, you never want to cover the bottom part with soil of the plant, whether that's a tree or an agave or well, with cactuses they're a little different. Just because soil is a really great way for rot and bacteria, fungus, all sorts of diseases to kind of get in there and mess with your plants. You can be really careful with these agaves, and as far as like, and really delicate, or you can just a lot of times I'll just throw these in, these little pups. A lot of times I'll just throw them in the ground, just because I have so many of them.
Yeah.
And if they make it, they make it. And I haven't had one die yet. They're pretty hardy, but it's always good to pot stuff up and always work things up into bigger and bigger pots before you put it in the ground. This is kind of the ideal size of plant to be putting into the ground here. It's got a lot of leaves, they're kind of big, the roots are really well established. I don't know if you can see here, they're starting to come in. And this is kind of the size you want to get them before you put them in the ground, especially someplace here, like here in Arizona, where it's so hot. And so these guys here, this one here, was actually this size. It was this was this big 6 months ago. So I just threw a bunch of them in a pot and some soil, and they took off. So then this is just something that anybody can do.
Even me.
And don't worry about it being real wobbly. With these, you're going to want to water them in. With most things that you plant, you're going to want to water it in. So let me get the hose. Just enough water that you wash off. You want to make sure that you're not getting any dirt in the crevices of the agaves there, because you'll end up rotting, especially if you keep them pretty wet. So just get it nice and wet, let it drain out. Get it wet again, fill it up.
So can you grow these anywhere?
You can grow agaves on the East Coast. The only thing you have to do is you have to bring them in. They're really cold sensitive. Keep them in a pot if you're growing them on the East Coast or somewhere where it gets cold, and bring them in during the winter months.
Okay.
Keep it warm. But here in Arizona, you can throw them in the ground. If they make it, they make it. You know, and I think that that's something that everybody be doing, because not everything, you might have in your head that you really want something in your yard, but everybody's got microclimates that are different unless you're really going to baby things. And if you put something in the ground and it doesn't last, don't try to do it again. Just keep going, just keep moving forward.
Learn from your mistakes.
Oh, the other thing you can do when you're doing agave, so like rooting hormone is really good to use, works really well for getting your plants to grow roots. And I'll talk more about this. You don't have to use rooting hormone, it just like
kind of speeds the process along.
it was like all right, cool. So cactuses now. So this is a Pachyceras, columnar cactus. Yeah, it grows straight up and it's big and tall, but it grows its head kind of like a bushel from the base.
A bushel?
Yeah, or like a, you know, like, I don't know, like a cup of pens.
Pens? Okay.
You know, it all comes from the bottom. It's basal in its growth form. Instead of it being a columnar cactus that grows and then has arms sprouting off, they all kind of come from the bottom. Yeah. So I've filled this pot up again, the black pot, really great. Filled it up halfway with soil. And so with this, you can see that there's no roots down here. It's just basically been hacked off from the base. What we're gonna do today is we're gonna pot this. It's really important that you put about 6 inches of soil. If you can support it, just do 2 or 3 inches. A lot of times with bigger pieces of columnar cactus, this one's shorter, so we'll do a couple inches, 2 or 3 inches.
Okay.
It won't fall over, but like this tall guy that we're gonna plant here in the back, like that's gonna have to be a little bit deeper. And I've got some in the garden that I'll show you guys that I've already done this with this season, and so they should have roots. So basically you've got your soil here, and then the rooting hormone. So don't breathe it in. You don't really want to get it on your skin, but I found that as long as you rinse off right afterwards, it's not that big a deal. And so there's a couple ways you can do the rooting hormone. I like to get my plant a little wet, so kind of just get it not super wet, because you don't want to encourage, moisture encourages bacterial growth, but just wet enough that you can kind of spread the powder on it and it'll stick. Yeah, when you're handling cactuses, you get just the cheap pigskin gloves. You know, they're like $2. They're really, it makes all the difference. If you don't have gloves and you need to handle cactuses in a pinch, like you see something out or somebody's going to give you a cactus, paper bags work really well. And then you just take some of your rooting hormone, and then we're going to put more root hormone on in just a sec once we get this in the pot. We're going to put this in here. Alright, so we're going to get this in here. We'll put a little bit more along the sides of the cactus here. Not a whole lot, just enough that it mixes in with the soil. I don't typically like to use chemicals. Like, I don't like to use fertilizer other than fish emulsion with really anything. Root hormone is the one thing I will use, just because it makes, for a lot of desert plants, and anytime you're growing stuff from cuttings, it makes it a lot easier. It facilitates that growth a lot faster. All right, so do you want to hold this up, or do you want to scoop the dirt?
I'll scoop the dirt.
Okay.
There you go.
Beautiful.
Yay!
So with these, so with the agaves, we water them in, and a lot of times when you plant plants, you want to water them in. With this, you don't. You just want to get the soil just a little damp, and then you want to leave it for like 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, as the roots develop, because you don't want to keep adding, because there's that exposed surface that's in the soil. You don't want to keep adding moisture that can get fungus inside into your plant. So get it wet, just very quickly, just to kind of let the soil settle.
And then
Leave it alone. Put it in a place that gets indirect sun, so you can stick it inside. We're gonna set it out here on the porch, on the patio, where it gets pretty good shaded sunshine. And there you go. And there you have it. And in a couple, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks, it'll start growing roots. And then in about 3 months, you can throw it in the ground. Once you pull it out of the pot to put it in the ground, you'll notice all the roots and stuff growing. So yeah.
yay! We got it.
Yeah.
We did it.
So that's it, guys. You've got your agaves and your cactus all potted up, ready to go. And you guys hopefully know the difference between the two of them now.
Agaves, cactus, cacti.
I think either way.
Okay. And we're done.
Thank you.
Bye.